More NBA draft talk as we dive into prospects. Bennedict Mathurin, Kendall Brown, and Johnny Davis coming up right here at Locked On Rockets.
It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start.
With the second pick in the 2021 NBA Draft, the Houston Rockets select Jalen Green.
T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal.
I'm going to keep working. I'm going to keep getting better every day. I'm going to keep perfecting my craft. And every time I step on that floor, I'm coming.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What's up, and welcome to another episode of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian, and also host of Locked On NBA Mondays. Be sure to follow along on Twitter at JT Gatlin. The show, of course, at Locked On Rockets, where we sincerely thank you for making Locked On Rockets your first listen each and every day. Joining us now is the founder, even though he gives me hell when I say the founder of T and Rockets, the founder, sole proprietor, what have you, of T and Rockets, Nathan Fogg. T and prospects now, right, Nathan?
Yeah. I'm playing around with it, but then I launched it and I was like, I've kind of launched a sister site, but then you mentioned that I'd done it in Warriors colors, I've done it in yellow and blue, so I've put it on the shelf for a while and I've got some things to figure out. It was like a soft launch that didn't go well, so we'll figure it out.
I saw the T and prospects on Twitter and I was like, you know what? I was so excited about it, but then immediately the PTSD kicked in when I saw the Warriors colors and I was like, no, we can't have this. We've got to roll this out. I like the idea, but we've got to do it in some different colors.
Yeah. So if anyone's got any ideas for a color scheme, that's a little bit different than red and white.
There we go. Yeah. DM Nathan on Twitter at Nathan Fogg 1 with 2 G's. Can't forget the second G. But let's go ahead. And we've got 3 prospects here lined up today to dive into, as we've been doing with Nathan regularly. We were supposed to do it last week. Unfortunately, I fell a little bit ill, so we had to reschedule. But here is Nathan. We're here to pick his brain on 3 prospects coming up. So we've got Bennedict Mathurin, Kendall Brown, and Johnny Davis to talk about today. And we're going to start with Bennedict Mathurin. And Nathan, this is like just an aside from like the basketball stuff on the floor. I mean, obviously Mathurin's a really like solid shooter, and I can't get past the idea of thinking that there are hundreds of jokes there about like just doing the Benny math on teams by out shooting them from 3. So like I selfishly kind of like Bennedict Mathurin just because of the jokes that could be had there. But my takeaway so far from him, he's just a really, really quality shooter. The form looks good. I mean, he's got a gift there when it comes to shooting the basketball.
Yeah, it's his number one skill, and it's exactly what you're drafting. I think Mathurin's got the sort of closest ceiling and floor of any prospect we'll talk about, and probably one of the whole draft. It's like very narrow,
razor thin.
Yeah. I'd be shocked if he ever becomes, he's not someone that we're talking about as a potential top 30, 40 guy in the league, but it's like if you think on that 2017, 18 Rockets, if you convince yourself like Eric Gordon was top 50 or maybe Clint Capella, that type of player is maybe at his best. But the shooting is as you mentioned, his form, it's very pretty and it's very consistent. And I just have here a note that he's shooting 46% on shots 25 to 30 feet on 50 attempts this year. So most of his shots are really deep. That's NBA range. That's more than NBA range. I mean, the 3-point line in NBA is 23.9, I think. So he's hitting really deep ones. I question a little bit how he moves off screens and whether he can rebalance himself. That's something that hopefully someone's got like a synergy login who can tell me those tight, the sort of Ben McLemore type shots where you're curling off a screen and you've got to rebalance yourself in the air. But his shooting is elite, I think, and that's very tantalizing when you consider, maybe a 4-out, 1-in offense with Şengün or next to Kevin Porter Jr. and Jalen Green. It's just whether you kind of want to go with higher potential with someone like Johnny Davis or whether you're happy with Mathurin. I mean, if Houston fell to like 5th, 6th, 7th, and we're talking about Chet, Paolo, Jabari, and then we fall to Mathurin, that's obviously going to be like a disappointment. But he's got a very, very solid skill base, which is why he's. And if you're wondering why he's a shooter going top 10, in most mocks. It's because sorry, my girlfriend's calling. It's because he's flashing some passing ability too. So he's been getting showdown on pick and rolls more recently, where two are going to the ball, and he's like immediately passing out. He's a really quick decision maker. We're not, he's only averaging 2.3 assists, so it's not a huge part of his game, but he makes quick decisions and he keeps the ball moving, and he's a very low, he could be a low or high usage, he's a very scalable player. So he kind of fits into most systems. And then with his athleticism as well, that's where you're starting to get to some top 10 vibes with him.
Also, I appreciate the, shout out to Rockets legend, which at this point, if you haven't caught on yet, any player who's ever played for the Rockets is a Rockets legend. It's just kind of a running joke at this point, but Rockets legend, Ben McLemore. Nathan, we can't call those Ben McLemore shots anymore. Those are now Garrison Matthews shots. Come on, man, where you're curling off a screen. You've got to rebalance yourself and you're, contorted midair as you're trying to get the shot off. Those are Gary Bird shots now. Okay. We've got to make sure that we, make sure we reset there. No more Ben McLemore for that. But I am kind of concerned just about it. It seems there's like I don't want to say like a lack of explosion, but just the, what happens when guys do start running him off the 3-point line, right? Is there a confidence that he's going to have the ability to be able to make those reads and make, react to defenses at the NBA level and, finish driving to the rim? Or as you alluded to, like the passing, has been kind of nice off of some of those screens, but can he be a guy that can add more to his game and be a finisher at the NBA level rather than just like a spot up shooter?
Yeah, so something Mathurin has, which is really nice, is a floater, which is often you're asking someone to add that to their game, 2 or 3 years into the NBA, once you realize they're getting this attention of a 3-point line. So he's shooting about 48% from floater range, which is really quite nice, actually. And he's got a good pump fake as well. So he does leverage the gravity he has when someone tries to close out hard on him. He's got a quick pump fake, a quick first step. And like I said, just fast decisions. So I don't think he's exploding past anyone and making crazy, layups around big guys, but he relies on the floater, and then he just makes really good bounce passes to the cutter. The one thing he's really got to work on, which is a real problem right now, is his lob passing. That's something that he needs to get more consistent of. But everything else, he was making, I think it was a game, I can't remember which game it was recently, but he was like throwing these bullet passes with his offhand. Like his passing is really accurate and really fast. So he releases it quickly and it goes right down, right into the hands. So like he's, if he is just a shooter in the NBA, then it's a wasted 7th, 8th, 9th pick. But if he translates this floater and the mid-range game and the passing stuff and becomes a secondary option of what attacking warp defenses, that's when you start to get into the higher range of his ceiling. I like Mathurin because I'm a bit skeptical on the other guys we'll talk about, but if someone was like, that's just a guy who can get in the second round and I'd rather just have a shooter for cheaper money, then I totally get that as well. But we have to talk about his defense as well. His defense has been inconsistent, I'd say. At the start of the year, I thought he was really poor, and then he's got really better. He started to defend drives better. He started to use his body well, where he's getting turned every which way at the start of the season. Now he's using better angles on the drives. He jumps to passing lanes. He's 6'6", 6'7", apparently. He's got pretty long arms, so he is quite active. He had a stinker of a game against Tennessee recently, which really was jarring to watch how bad he was defensively in the first half. So I'm going to be keeping a closer eye on him, but I know there's a lot of people who think he can at least get to an average level. And I think he's got a decent IQ as well. I don't think he's going to be lost in every possession, defensively, like someone like maybe Ben McLemore was, unfortunately.
Another Benny Mac shout out while we're talking about Benny Math. So with that, I come away thinking this to me, Bennedict Mathurin strikes me as one of the guys that has a chance, right? He's, floating, top 10 right now on some boards. He strikes me as a guy that has a chance to kind of drop a little bit and be one of those guys that you might pick up, luckily, right? Like, a mid-tier first instead of you're talking like lottery or something like that, just because he doesn't have that crazy exciting package of potential. He's just, like we said earlier, very just solid around the board and that very kind of razor thin margin between floor and ceiling, right?
Yeah, I would say Arizona does have good guard play. So I don't think it's a complete lost cause to say bet on some potential of him. I don't want to completely sort of undersell some of the higher outcomes. Like I said, he does have the flashes, and I do think he's going to be a very smart player in a team where he can just play with the guys around him and be on the court in the playoffs, that type of guy. So that's a safe pick. And honestly, it kind of, well, if we're talking about the Rockets, it just depends on what their philosophy is, because they have so many picks. Are they trying to hit a lottery on each pick, or do they think, okay, we'll use one or two of these picks over the next 5 years to just get a solid player who has, some upside, but also a very high floor as well. That's just something that's, I'm glad I'm not Raphael Stone and have to make those decisions, but I'm sure he's paid very well.
Draft philosophy is a conversation for another day, one that you and I will definitely have as we get closer to the draft. But coming up, we're going to break down Kendall Brown next after a quick message from our friends over at betonline.ag. BetOnline would like to wish you a happy new betting year as we continue our march to the playoffs and beyond. BetOnline remains the #1 spot for all the best sports wagering action for 2022. New year and a new updated desktop and mobile website where if you sign up today using promo code LOCKEDON, you'll get a 50% welcome bonus on your very first deposit. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDON for a 50% bonus on your first deposit from football, basketball, hockey, boxing, UFC, even your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for 2022. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to wager on all of your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, we appreciate you making Locked On Rockets your first listen each and every day. The NBA trade deadline is right around the corner, February 10th. And we will be doing a live trade deadline show here at Locked On. Go to the Locked On NBA YouTube channel, subscribe, turn on the notifications so you know when the show goes live. It'll be from 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern time. The deadline is 3 p.m. Eastern time. So you get before and after reactions. And hey, if the Rockets do something at the trade deadline, I'm going to be there to talk about it. So go check it out. Continuing on here with Nathan Fogg, let's dive into Kendall Brown, who has some ridiculous athleticism. He's like, we go from it's kind of weird going from like Mathurin to like Kendall Brown here in the middle, and then we're going to go to Johnny Davis at the end, because it's like we isolated all the explosiveness in the middle segment here with Kendall Brown.
Yeah, he is. He's 6'8", maybe even a bit higher, I think, than what he's listed. Forward in Baylor, someone who
6'8", 6'10" with the hair.
Yeah, maybe that's what. Yeah, maybe that's what it is. He's probably got a high tops on as well. I think that earlier in the year, he was the first guy to really rise. Obviously, we were talking about a 5-player draft with Jalen Duren, and he's dropped. And now Brown was the first guy who was the big riser, and who people were talking about fifth in the draft even. He was just killing it from. So what Kendall Brown does, if you've never watched him, is he stands in the corner, not even in the corner, in the short corner, because he doesn't shoot at all.
He's like almost in the dunker spot, like a lot of games, right?
It's a short corner, yeah. It's like in between the dunker spot and the corner, and he operates in spaces which don't exist in the NBA court, basically. No one stands there in the NBA. But he was just relentless in baseline cuts, in offensive rebounds, and he just looked like this force. Like, he plays above the rim, he's so strong, and like he was just getting 10, 15 points just from baseline cuts all game. And then he started getting on the scouting report because there was a game, again, sorry, I can't remember the team, but they had a play where it was kind of, and they don't have big men who shoot, Baylor. So they had the two centers, and they had the forward, Jonathan Chachua, who shoots like 0.3 a game. And it was kind of like a Rockets, you'll see the Rockets run it, where it's like two screens on the perimeter, no one in the paint. But for some reason, the other team was guarding Baylor centers at the perimeter. So there was nobody in the paint, Kendall Brown in the corner, which means when the guard got to the rim, Kendall Brown's man is the rotator to come to the rim. And that's when Kendall Brown cuts and gets these lob dunks and everything. It looks amazing. And then I feel like teams kind of realize, why are we guarding centers who don't shoot on the perimeter? We're just going to play drop coverage. We'll just task the weak side man. Do not let Kendall Brown get past you. You'll get subbed if you let him pass you. And then he started averaging 2 points, 3 points, 4 points. He had a 5 or 6 game stretch where he didn't get more than 6 points. He just got completely nullified. And if you look at his conference play, I've got these down. He's averaging against conference teams 5.8 points, and he has an offensive rating. So Baylor is scoring 104 points per possession, per 100 possessions when he's on the court. Against non-conference teams, that's 126. So he's just been completely neutralized by not even a very smart scheme. It's just, please guard him at the weak side, and you're not the rotator. We have a big and drop, and just like, don't let him go. Like, there's only so much you can do. Like, if a team, you could hide a small guard on him almost, and it's an over the back foul if he tries to go over it. So like, he's so he's so wasted in the offense because I was hoping he would show these. I mean, use him as a point guard or use him as a roller. You know, he's 6'9", maybe he
He's
can finish
shown.
above the rim.
That's something that I've like seen in flashes from him. He's shown an ability to create for others, and I think that
Yeah.
like his decision making out of those little like the short corner spots that he's been in, where when the defense does collapse, if he doesn't have like the opening right there at the rim, he's shown that ability to just make a quick decision, the quick little shovel pass, or like kicking them out for open three. Like he's made the right decisions, and I wonder, like that's something that I was kind of concerned about, is just looking at him as if you're looking at him as a non-shooter, then why not put the ball in his hands and try to see what more he can do with it, right?
Yeah, I'll use him as a screener. I've not seen him used as a screener once, and I've watched probably 15 of his 17 games in their entirety. I don't think I've ever seen him set a screen and roll, which is just crazy to me. Like, again, it's probably not Baylor at 15-2 or whatever, so they're doing fine. But he would have to be used a lot differently in the NBA for him to have any success offensively. And defensively, he's very good, but he's not elite, I don't think, to the point where you just have to play him into hell with the offense. I mean, he's had some weird off-ball stuff where he gets backdoor caught. I think he's a good hell defender, so he's waiting to see what the ball handler does. As soon as the ball handler goes around the pick, he's there. But that means he's kind of not paying attention to his own man, and he gets lost a lot. But on the ball, he's really good. Obviously, he's so big and strong, and he can shuffle his feet well. You know, when he's under the rim as a rotator, he's contested vertically and all that. So he's going to be a very good defender, I'm sure. But offensively, I think it's just you'd have to bring him in for workouts for your team who's thinking of drafting him, and you just have to see what he can do that he's not doing at Baylor. But right now, he's not even a lottery pick for me anymore. I mean, he's still hanging around sort of 10-11 on mock drafts. So I would be shocked if he plays like this. I mean, Matisse Thybulle was a great defender, and he went 20th, I think, to Philly. So that's more the range, I would say, for Kendall Brown. And I mean, Houston should probably stay well away because I just don't think it fits for Houston at all. But I still don't see where people think the lottery stuff is coming from, because he's averaging like 2 assists a game. He's not really shown great. Like, I'm more excited about Bennedict Mathurin's passing ability than Kendall's, and he doesn't have this great handle. He uses this in and out dribble, which gets him to his spots sometimes, but it's not great, and that's kind of the only thing he has. So like, he's not a Ben Simmons explosive. He's explosive in transition. That's where he's like just a killer, but he's not like this great playmaker. Or I see him more as a small ball 5, you know, setting screens and rolling. That's his key to success offensively, in my opinion.
I was going to ask kind of what the vision was for him potentially at the next level as an NBA player, because right, he's not a guard, he's not a wing. Like, you know what? I guess we do just come away thinking he's a small ball, like explosive 5, but at that point, like, he's not big enough to realistically guard other 5s. Like, he's so like thin in frame, he'd have to fill out quite a bit more. Like, even like you have like, you know, using the Rockets as a current example, right? KJ Martin plays small ball 5 occasionally, but he uses his leaping ability, his athleticism really well, both offensively and defensively. And he's actually got like he's got a little bit of size to be able to like kind of body up against some of the bigs that he might match up against on that end. But I feel like Kendall Brown would just get tossed around like a rag doll if he was guarding an NBA 5 tomorrow, which, you know, he's not.
Yeah, I think he's stronger than you're giving him credit for. I think he's a little bit bigger, but he's as a roller, we have no idea if he can he catch. Has he got good hands? Can he take one bounce, go straight to the rim? Can he take no bounces, just catch short roll and go straight to the rim? Can he pass to the corner? I have no idea. I literally never seen it before. So that's something that podcasters and amateur scouts and all that, we'll basically just have to put a question mark next to, and the team that bring him in for workouts will have to figure out themselves.
And he's only attempted 15 threes is the other thing. Like,
the threes, I mean, his shot is, I mean, I hear a lot of people saying like, oh, I believe in his shot, I think he'll figure it out. I don't know why anyone would say that. Like, his shot is so flat-footed and it doesn't look close at all. He could start to shoot, but it's like saying Ben Simmons could start to shoot. It's like, okay, I mean, I guess so, but I wouldn't put any stock in it. You know.
I wonder if it's if at this point he strikes me as almost like one of those project picks where, right, like there's a lot of like the raw physical gifts there, but it would be so much work for him to put it together at the next level to try and figure some things out. Do you have, I know you mentioned Tybal earlier. Do you have like another comp that you could think of as somebody who, maybe coming out, they had the physical gifts and it took them a while to put it together at the NBA level as like an optimistic comp for Brown?
Oh, he put me on the spot. I mean, I know Keon Johnson obviously was that guy for Tennessee last year, and we have no idea if he's going to figure it out. And he went in the 20s, so that's probably where I think Kendall will drop. Yeah, I can't think of anyone off the top of my head. I need a forewarning if you're going to ask a question like that.
Terrible. Worst draft expert I'm pulling on this show. Doesn't even have draft comps ready. No, it's okay. No, again, I didn't mean to put you on the spot. It was just one of those, like, because I was kind of racking my brain trying to think of, okay, like, based on like what we've seen out of him, and I can't find a comp in my head that makes sense. So,
yeah, I mean, if he becomes like really good defensively and he becomes a kind of Michael Kidd-Gilchrist small ball 5, that and is something of maybe he can run plays and delay actions in from the elbow. I mean, Michael Kidd-Gilchrist obviously went second and was this huge bust, but then later kind of found a niche and became a guy who was maybe worth the MLE or whatever. That's somewhere he could stick in. But at the start when I was watching him, I was like, oh, this is the guy where if he just gets a 3-point shot, he's going to like really pop. And now I'm thinking like, if he gets a 3-point shot, he's still not that good offensively, I don't think, because he's still not really shown me that he can beat a guy off a dribble or, has much craft or anything. So it's a lot of tools that he has to work on to be, this a two-way player, if you will.
Well, with that, I think that's a good spot to stop on Kendall Brown, which leaves us Johnny Davis to talk about here coming up in the third segment, which we'll do in just one moment after a quick message from our friends over at Built Bar. It's the new year, so that means New Year's resolutions. If yours is about getting fit or eating healthier, make sure you include Built Bar in your plan. Built Bar is the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar, maybe even better than a candy bar. Built Bar makes it easier to stick to your New Year's resolution because it tastes so good, you'll want to eat it. Unlike other protein bars, which can be chalky or waxy or gritty or the consistency is just a little bit off. Look, and with Built Bar, the flavors are so amazing. Strawberry, mint brownie, peanut butter, my personal favorite, coconut brownie chunk. You can't go wrong with a single flavor on their menu. Every single bar, low cal, low sugar, high protein, high fiber. And you can check them out. Just go to built.com and use promo code LOCK15 to get 15% off your very next order of the best tasting protein bars on the market. Again, that's promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at built.com. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, thanks for making Locked On Rockets your first listen each and every day. For your second listen, go check out the Locked On Bets podcast. Make a little money with your friends over at Locked On Bets, hosted by your boy Q with expert analysis and insight from Lee Sterling, free and available on all platforms. Johnny Davis. This is a guy who has jumped from his freshman year to his sophomore year, was averaging 7 points a game in his freshman year and has skyrocketed and is now averaging 22 and a half points a contest in this one. And this was a name that the last time we did one of these, Nathan, we had a lot of people saying we should, in the comments on YouTube, there were people saying, you guys should be talking about Johnny Davis, not Jaden Ivey, because of that performance that he had against Jaden Ivey previously.
Yeah, Ivy was in foul trouble for a lot of that game. I'll just point out. Johnny Davis.
We've got the Ivy apologist on the podcast now.
Ivy did a really good job defensively on Davis. If you watch a game, but Davis obviously had a great, way outperformed Ivy. Obviously, Davis is, he's kind of becoming the consensus fifth now. You might get AJ Griffin there, but he's obviously the high riser, as you say. One of the top scorers in college basketball, one of the best on-ball defenders in college basketball. That's like a pretty easy sell to anyone. He is playing on a pretty bad Wisconsin team who have no shooters around him at all. And he gets to do whatever the fuck he wants in offense. So, watching him is one of the most painful experiences of watching a 25-point per game or 22-point per game scorer that I've had, because he just takes ridiculous shots. I mean, it's he will just stare at 2 weak sky guys and just look at them, and he'll have two men over him, towering over him with their arms above him, and he'll I'm going to throw a backwards falling fadeaway floater instead of passing. He doesn't pass at all. And earlier in the season, he was hitting these crazy shots, and that's kind of going away now, where he's not lighting it up from the mid-range as much. He's shooting 36% from on 2-point shots that aren't at the rim. That's a really poor number. Obviously, they are very contested, and he's having to do all of it. That's the point. He's having to do this to a certain extent because Wisconsin are really bad without him.
Well, it reminds me a little bit of, honestly, the like Cam Thomas's shot selection for LSU. Like that's something that I kind of saw a little bit of out of Davis, and I'm thinking like, yeah, I mean, it's kind of one of those things where when the team is that bad, you're just kind of like, okay, like you kind of get it, but at the same time, you wonder how that decision making is going to like evolve at the next level.
Yeah, this is something I've been flip-flopping over for the last 2 weeks with him and Mathurin, because they're going to go very close together. And Brown obviously has way more potential than Mathurin, but I could just see him taking this shot profile on an NBA team and just getting kicked out in 2 years, because he needs to take better shots. He needs to pass more. Will he do that with Jalen Green next to him instead of, a 30 or 17% point shooter next, 3-point shooter? I don't know. But right now he's doing what he has to do to drag Wisconsin to win. So I will give him credit for that. And I appreciate everything has to have context with it. But it's getting pretty ridiculous, some of the shots he takes. And I'm not convinced he's a good enough shooter whereby you say, okay, because I was thinking, okay, maybe if you put him in more of a 3-and-D role, he just is amazing. He's so efficient. He's shooting 37% on threes. Most of those are assisted. He doesn't take a lot of pull-up, off the dribble threes. So I'm not sure he's like this great shooter. If you put him off a catch, if you put him off a ball more. I'm also not convinced he gets a lot of separation with his first step and he sort of has much craft in the pick and roll. I think once he gets off the screen, that's when he gets downhill. But whether he can be a sort of standstill creator, maybe as a 6-man type or as a first option, I don't think so. I'm not sure either way, but I do have questions over his first step, because there's definitely been times where he just doesn't get any separation and just rises up for the shot anyway. So it really just depends on how big of a gambler you are, because you look at a guy who's averaging 20-odd points and clearly has these clutch shots, or whatever that gene is that some players has. He has that. It's hard to pass down for Bennedict Mathurin, who you might say will never be a top 50 player. That's definitely up to how much of a gambler you are. And what I will say in Davis's defense is that he is amazing on ball as a defender. I think he's really, really good. I think he's really good at chasing off ball screens. I think his one weakness is he gets taken out on every on ball screen ever. Like, he goes over it all the time. He always gets taken out. I'm not sure he's great at sort of pick and roll defenders, but as just an on ball isolation defender, he's really good and he's really competitive. So that gives him a high ceiling as well, depending on the offense, what happens there.
Going back to, you mentioned his, the lack of a first step for him, even though he doesn't necessarily have like a super explosive first step, I do think he does a good job, I think, of shielding kind of defenders off of him and still being able to finish, in a variety of ways, like at the back, or at least not maybe in a variety of ways, but finishing through, some, minor contact here and there at the rim, basically like, driving and maybe like getting just a little ahead of his defender, right, and kind of tucking them away like on his back hip and then finishing that way. So it's not like he's, blowing by these guys, but at least he's finishing at a decent clip at the rim.
Yeah, and he's a good foul drawer as well. As soon as he feels contact, he rises up. He's averaging about 6.5 free throws a game. So he gets a lot of like really bullshit calls that you'd hate if you're on the opposing team, because like he just does a Trae Young guy in his back, just rises up. So that might be why some of his shots are so bad, because if he doesn't get the foul, then it looks bad. But obviously he was going for the foul. So at the rim shot, I think, I have it here. So 60% of his 2-point shots are not at the rim. So I mean, 60% of his shots from 2-point land are jumpers. That's a really inefficient, unhealthy shot profile for me. So it just, like, where do you slot him in? Does he become a 3-and-D guard? Do you give him lead creation stuff? Is he ever going to be able to be, a score in isolation or score against good defenders? I don't think so at a high level. I think he has to play more efficiently in the NBA. And I would be very worried about how he sort of settles into an NBA team. I honestly can't decide between him and Mathurin. I would not want to make my call.
He strikes me as, like, right now, just like the ideal, almost like supercharged sixth man, right? Where you bring him in, you put the ball in his hands, and he doesn't necessarily have the obligation to have to steer the offense or create for others. He's just going in and getting his. And that's kind of basically all we've seen so far to this point, because we haven't seen more out of him as a playmaker to this point. So there's just a gigantic question mark on whether or not he can kind of create for others, at a decent clip. You mentioned, if he's creating for Jalen Green versus somebody else, right? Maybe he's more willing to share the basketball and make the right, reads, the right plays at that point. But it's not like the Jaden Ivey situation where you have optimism that Jaden Ivey can leverage his insane athleticism and insane driving ability to create for others at the NBA level, which is almost a given when you're looking at, the type of package that he brings to the table.
Yeah, and since we're kind of comparing all these guys, again, I would say I think Mathurin's a better passer than him, has shown more passing ability and variety of passes. So he's going to be a bucket getter in the NBA, which is a value that's maybe getting less valuable in the league. I mean, everyone says Jordan Clarkson now because he's kind of the only guy who you think of as like that just bucket getter. You kind of want as a six man someone to set the table a bit more and be more multifaceted. I just want to see, unfortunately, we're not going to see much more because he's going to be able to take all these shots and try and get Wisconsin to more wins. I would be really interested to see his film study that he does. I'm presuming there'll be one with Mike Schmitz that ESPN does, just to see what he's working on, what he thinks of all this. Whether he says, I know I need to pass it more, but again, just another question mark over him because he's not going to play like this in the NBA. So that always makes it unpredictable. Whereas someone like Bennedict Mathurin is going to play exactly like this in the NBA. So that just gives you more sort of data points to work with over what you're selecting. I mean, just to bring it to Houston, again, it depends on how high you are on KPJ and Jalen Green, obviously, and Josh Christopher. It would be a weird 4-guard rotation, I'll say that, to have all 4 of these guys, that's for sure.
One thing that we've kind of touched on with each of these 3 prospects is passing. And so I wanted to just one, kind of thing to toss in here at the end, Nathan. What are you looking at when you're trying to evaluate a passer at the college level? Because the games are so inherently different, I feel like, when you're talking about college basketball versus NBA basketball. And that's one of the things that I struggle with is trying to evaluate these prospects, is figuring out, okay, how will this person's game translate to the next level? So what are you looking at when you're trying to evaluate passing at the college level?
I think like vision and degree of difficulty is important. I think someone like Kendall Brown might get the same amount of assists, but Kendall doesn't really have much degree of difficulty with passes. And it depends on your position as well. If you think of someone who maybe he's like a forward who makes more connective passes, I don't need him to be a great passer, but with Bennedict Mathurin, I really want him to be someone who you can kick the ball to him and he can attack a pick and roll and then pass to a warp defense. Those are the guys, the guards are the guys who penetrate and then pass around. Whereas someone like Kendall Brown, you just ask him to kind of make the extra pass, keep it moving type of thing. I think it's accuracy, it's pace, obviously. It's whether you're hitting the help, who the guy helps off, whether you're a willing passer, and then variety as well. If you're doing the same passes all the time, that means you're a kind of a one-trick pony, which is great. But if you're doing different stuff, then like Alperen Şengün, when I was watching him in Turkey, was just doing a different, ridiculous pass every game like he is in Houston. That shows like inventiveness and decision-making and quick decision-making. If you're doing something that's a bit more methodical and like Bennedict Mathurin was getting suddenly just double-teamed. It was the first time I'd seen it 15 games into the season, and he just immediately turn, release, hit the roller, offhand. That's something that is like improvised. That's not something that he presumably works on or is scripted. So that's something that kind of stood out to me. Whereas, with Davis, it's more penetrating kick, except he doesn't kick very often. But when he does, that's kind of more of a simpler read, I guess.
Coming into this, I was a little bit more hyped on Johnny Davis just because the scoring numbers do just really jump out of the page at you. But I also came in optimistically like excited about Bennedict Mathurin just because, again, he just strikes you as such a solid piece. And, one of the guys you almost think, you look at Mathurin and you think he's going to have like a solid, like long NBA career just because he's going to be like, a guy that could be conceivably in a rotation, anywhere, right? You slot him in, he's going to be a quality shooter. He's going to, presumably be a decent defender at the NBA level. Like you just see a lot of it panning out for him. Whereas with Johnny Davis, it's kind of like flash in the pan. Like, is he, is it going to work? Is he going to have like a brief stint where he's really good for like 2 years and then drop off the face of the earth, that kind of thing. So I walk away. You've kind of sold me on Bennedict Mathurin, honestly, Nathan. I think I come away thinking he's the most exciting prospect of the 3 that we've talked about today.
Yeah, I think once you get out of the top, however many is in the draft, this year's draft is the top 4. I start to look at how many skills do you have and how many skills can you afford to lose in the NBA. So someone like just a pure shooter who's maybe you don't have a huge sample size on, if his shot fails, then like he's screwed type thing. If he can't defend, he can't pass, he can't do anything else. It's how many bankable skills do you have and how many can you work on? And usually we drop off. So Paolo's like great passer, he's a rebounder, he can shoot, he can create his own shot. Jabari Smith, all the same stuff. And then you get further down and you might only have 2 skills or 1 skill. You're a 3-and-D wing who's theoretical as a 3, theoretical as a defender. And you're trying to work on both. I think Bennedict is the one guy so far of the ones we've looked at outside of the top 4 who has a lot of, he kind of has a lot of like chips on the table, but he has a lot of things that you can bank on because he really does leverage his 3-point shot. So he'll weak side cut you, backdoor cut you, if you overplay him. He sneaks in for offensive rebounds. I think he gets about 2.5 every, per 40 minutes, which for, 6'6" guard is really good. And he like I said, he plays in the flow of the offense. He's not a ball stopper at all. And he's a quick decision maker. So, and with the defensive, inconsistent, but with flashes of being good, that's a lot of stuff where you can say, okay, 4 of these 5 things are going to pan out. Whereas with someone like Johnny Davis, it's much more theoretical. And if the one thing doesn't pan out, which is his tough shot making, then it's a much trickier future for him, if that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense. And honestly, again, we walk away. Bennedict Mathurin got 1.5 segments out of this episode. He was only supposed to get 1. So that was impressive in and of itself. But Nathan, always a pleasure to be able to pull you on and talk Rockets. Well, not Rockets hoops, but now prospect hoops, in conjunction with what it means for the future of the Houston Rockets. But go ahead and let our listeners know where they can track you down at.
Well, Nathan Fogg 1 on Twitter. We're going to talk about Rockets and prospects as well all the time now. I think next show we'll hit on AJ Griffin and Jalen Duren as well. Those are probably higher guys than Kendall Brown or whatever. So we're still figuring out, Houston can fall as far as 6 or 7, maybe even 8, depending on the roster. So these are all guys you need to really pay attention to. And I'll be helping you out here with you every couple of weeks.
Always a pleasure, Nathan. Thanks for stopping by.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
That's going to do it for today's episode. Which prospect of the 3 that we talked about excites you the most? Bennedict Mathurin, Kendall Brown, or Johnny Davis? Let us know in the comments on YouTube. If you haven't done so yet, please consider subscribing wherever you listen to your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Google, brand new Odyssey app, free and available on all platforms. Already mentioned the YouTube channel. Go to YouTube, search Locked On Rockets, like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. As always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. And we look forward to having you back right here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.